That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Starve Acre, the sophomore film directed by Daniel Kokotajlo, which premiered at the 2023 BFI London Film Festival. It is being released courtesy of Brainstorm Media on July 26th, 2024.
Do I know this director's first film?
Apostasy from 2018. No, but I also went back and watched it because I liked this one well enough. And it's a very different film, but with very eerily similar thematic vibes about religion.
What is Starve Acre about? An idyllic rural family life of a couple is thrown into turmoil when their son starts acting out of character.
And notably, this is based on a well-renowned 2019 novel by Andrew Michael Hurley.
What's your pull quote?
A sinister slice of slow-burn folk horror. You might need to be in the mood for the lethargic confirmation of dread in Starve Acre, but hurtling into the howling aftermath of anguish in the finale is worth the wait.
Mine. Like many other folk horror entries, Starve Acre takes an intriguing idea and stretches it to formulate this subgenre's particular mood. I thought this movie was fine. It feels like a lot of movies I've seen.
I probably enjoyed it a little bit more than you, but I tend to like this subgenre more anyway.
The story is, it's like the early 70s in England.
Yorkshire.
And there's a family living in this rural town. It's mom, played by
Juliette, played by Morfydd Clark.
Dad.
Who you know from St. Maud. And dad is Richard, played by Matt Smith.
And they have a little kid who's maybe
He's pre-adolescent.
like 7 or 8, maybe. Anyway, the film opens with this little boy gouging a pony's eye out.
It's very equus.
And we're told that, from people at school, that he's a little weirdo. So one day the parents go in, I believe it's to a therapist.
Yes, and notably, for the past, they moved to this estate. It's in Richard's family from the city.
And when they go see this therapist, the mom says, well, I've noticed that our son was sort of in his sleep saying that Jack Gray is whistling to him. So maybe he has an imaginary friend. Maybe that's part of why he's acting weird. And the dad, Matt Smith, gets really ruffled. You didn't tell me that. So they start talking and realize that when Jack Gray is not new to Matt Smith. That when he was a kid, that was something that he was told, which we'll get back to. But anyway, one day, and this is early on in the film, within the first 20 minutes, that little boy just drops dead. So then the next 40 minutes is the parents dealing with that loss in two very different ways. Because the mom, she has a sister.
Harrie, played by Erin Richards.
And she comes over to help her sister grieve. And part of that grieving process is the neighbor has a wife.
Yeah, Sean Gilder is the neighbor.
And she comes over and performs a seance.
A cleansing.
A cleansing, trying to help this mother sort of let her child go. And the dad, I think he's an academic.
He's an archaeological lecturer.
So he one day goes into the farm shed and finds a box that belonged to his dad. And in that box are some bones that look like the bones of the chupacabra. And over time, over the next 40 minutes, those bones start to reanimate until they turn into an actual bunny rabbit.
A hare.
And that's the beginning of the third act. And that's when we learn about Jack Gray, also known as Dandelion Gray. And apparently, Matt Smith's dad was into some devil worshipping shit. I don't know, but
pagan.
This little town they live in, this village, there used to be this big ass tree,
an oak tree,
and people would perform pagan rituals and sacrifices. And Matt Smith's dad was trying to sacrifice his ass because Matt Smith finally tells his wife, well, when I was a kid, my dad used to strip me down to my underwear, tape my mouth shut, drag me out to that tree hoping I would disappear. But it never happened, obviously.
And the tree has since been cut down and it has to be excavated, and they find its roots, which are basically mummified.
The town had cut that tree down and basically buried it.
The womb of nature.
And we learned this through like some books that the dad had and stories that Matt Smith is telling.
And the neighbor provides some key facts as well.
So what this all amounts to is there was this demon associated with this oak tree, and as we see it now, this demon is speaking through this bunny rabbit hair, and basically the demon wants 3 sacrifices. The first was that little boy. The next one is one of Matt Smith's colleagues, who he originally gone to say like, hey, do you see these bones? What do you think about them? But then realized that maybe it's not a good idea to share the bones. That colleague comes to check in on Matt Smith because he's taken a sabbatical because of the loss of his son. And he ends up getting killed. Actually, it's the wife who like stabs and kills the coworker. So that's the second sacrifice. And the third sacrifice is that poor sister.
Poor Harrie.
Trying to help her sibling out. So once the 3 sacrifices are satisfied, we see Matt Smith and his wife in like the baby's room, like a nursery, because since that bunny rabbit has reanimated, they've been treating it like a baby, specifically the mom. And we see her, the final shot of this film is this mother after the sister gets killed and buried. She breastfeeds this damn bunny rabbit. The end.
Yeah. Watership down to hell.
So what I mean by an intriguing idea is once we learn about Matt Smith's dad and what he was doing, and then we see the literature and the stories that the neighbor's telling about this tree and the people, I wanted to rewind like 20 years and see what these fools were doing with this tree. But as it is, it's like a lot of movies where we spend an hour in a rural countryside area with nice cinematography of like the fields and the clouds and the trees and then this idea of something creepy happening. And then when you finally realize what it is, it's like, oh, I would have liked to start out like after the boy dies, this bunny rabbit shows up and they start treating it like it's their kid and they start trying to kill people. And then in the end, we learn that it's a sacrifice to this demon that the dad had experience with. That would have been more my speed.
Sure, I don't mind the uneasiness that's built because you know that something's wrong. And the theme, I mean, the Wicker Man, of course, will be the comparison that this film can't escape from, which was released in the time that this is set. Or also Don't Look Now with Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie, about a couple also very eerily mourning the death of a child and kind of chasing a figment of that child around Venice. But as far as like modern folk horror goes, I like this better than Ennis Main, which we reviewed, about that lady that's exploring that weird flower, and there's...
Well, that felt a lot more abstract.
And it was, because this metaphysical journey. Or Ben Wheatley's A Field in England, which it feels like you need LSD to on board to kind of enjoy what's going on in that. And I liked it a lot more than something folk horror that's a lot more basic, like Apostle starring Dan Stevens. So I think there's definitely a mood. I think the cinematography from Adam Scarth, who previously worked with this director on Apostasy, I think is really good. The sound design is also pretty good. Matthew Herbert did the score, who's worked quite a bit with Sebastian Lelio, who's Lelio's film Disobedience, actually, when I was watching Apostasy, reminded there are a lot of similarities there. So yeah, I was kind of, I was probably more on board with its vibe than you were.
Yeah, because I only have one note, and it's about when the bunny rabbit reanimates, Matt Smith locks it in his office, and he's trying to like lure it to him because the rabbit's kind of hiding, and finally the wife barges in, like, what the hell are you doing? And then he finally lets her in and she sees the rabbit. And then she gets sort of like invested in it. Like she doesn't really question it beyond like, oh, we need to release it. So they trap it in a box, take the box out to like the woods, release it, but then the rabbit doesn't want to leave. So when it returns, it assaults the sister, like cuts up her arm. But then after that, the mom, Matt Smith's wife, she is treating it like a baby, like she has it with her. She puts it in a bassinet. But after they try to release it and it doesn't want to leave, they go and have sex. Like to represent that maybe it's like the first time they've like a new chapter has begun.
They're going to come together. I think the seance scene is actually pretty good too. It's very low key, but I think effective. And again, like Don't Look Now, where there's also a key seance sequence with a blind woman. I don't know. It's a nice kind of creepy vibe there. Also, there's another film directed by Ariane Lebed that played at Cannes called September Says, which also has this a similar kind of vibe about this dread instilled by having to go back, this family that has to go back to this place that is kind of haunted by memories. And the more we learn, because we really don't learn about the trauma of Matt Smith's Richard until kind of late in the game. And there's a key moment where Sean Gilder shows up while he's digging in the mud, and he's like, the reason Dandelion Gray took your kid is because you loved him. Like, that's part of the lore about what's required. Your dad tried to sacrifice you, but he didn't really love you.
He didn't take because your dad didn't love you.
There's some very powerful, complex issues going on beneath the surface of this kookiness. Because, on paper, some of this shit sounds really silly, but when it all comes together at the end, it's like, ugh.
But that's why I think I was left a little disappointed, because it's like they're talking about things that are much more interesting than what the movie is. Mm-hmm. And that, I feel like with more so in this genre than any other, do I feel that way.
Sure.
More often than not.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like, what it all amounted to is the thing that I actually wanted to experience, instead of an hour of like moodiness.
There are very few things that rise to the heights of Robin Hardy's original Wicker Man, but I do attempt anything that's kind of leaning into that area. Because you ask, when she pulls her nipple out and she's letting that hair suckle her, you're like, is she even lactating? But this is so bonkers it doesn't even matter. Unlike, say, that Jordan Ladd horror movie Grace, where she gives birth to the stillborn baby and then her mother-in-law keeps it alive because she's been pumping her breasts for years.
Oh.
If you remember that film. But
no.
where that kind of element would make sense and potentially take you out of it. But this is their changeling baby, this hair that doesn't need to be fed. There's another scene where she's trying to provide for it, Morfydd Clark, and she's like, it doesn't seem to need anything. Matt Smith is not usually my favorite screen presence, although he does do some weird. If you like this, I recommend this. I think it's a 2009 film called Womb, co-starring Ava Green, which I quite like, a Hungarian filmmaker, Benedikt Fliegauff, something, I'm probably mispronouncing that name. But Morfydd Clark, if you remember her from Saint Maud and that self-immolation, she has kind of that sissy SpaceX screen presence of like, something is affecting you.
I like Matt Smith's hair. It's longer, which helps. What would you give Starve Acre?
3.
It was okay. I would give it 2.5 out of 5. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.